everyone. I'm convening the March 24th, 2025 meeting of the Finance Committee. And we're starting out with our guests from the school department to talk about the school budget. I will turn it over to you all to do introductions and then go into the presentation.
All right, I will go ahead and get us started in just a minute. My name is Liz Hillman. I'm the superintendent of schools. But first, I want to introduce our new assistant superintendent of finance and operations, Mr. Brian Gorski. You want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Fran Gorski, as Liz said, assistant superintendent of finance and operations for the district. Been here since August. Previous to that, was the CFO in Somerville for 6 years. And previous to that, worked for the Boston Public Schools for a number of years as the accounting director.
Some of you might remember that we had about, I don't know, it felt like a year, but I think it was only about 7 months of vacancy in the finance office. So we're very happy to have Mr. Gorski with us. We've also hired a director of finance, Tam Tran, and he's been onboarding in the last couple of months, and it's been wonderful to have a fully staffed finance office in APS. I don't know if say anything. You've been with us through the build and stuff. So.
Right, so Dean, Peggy, and I are been working with the school department on their budget, and we're pleased to present it tonight. Dr. Holman will give you a much deeper explanation that we forwarded John's questions, some other questions. And it's been, as you will explain, it's a big process. They probably have the biggest budget in the town, and so it's a big process to bring all the numbers together, and I think they've done a great job.
And Mr. Schlickman, you want to do school committee member?
Sure, I'm Paul Schlickman. I'm chair of the school committee for the next 2 weeks or so, who our vice chair will ascend to this extraordinarily powerful position in April, and that's Jane Morgan. Laura Gittleson is our committee secretary to the right, and this is Mr. Thielman, who I'm sure you all know, who's been with us since 2003. Okay.
We were doing so well, Paul.
Well, you know, it's close.
No, I'm just mentioning that.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, ready to go?
Ready to go.
So I am going to get us started and talk a little bit, give some framing about the school budget for this year. I'll hand it off to Mr. Gorski. He'll go over some of the financials with you, and then I'll talk in more detail about some of the additions that are reflected in the budget documents that you received ahead of tonight's meeting. I want to thank all of you for the time that we get to spend with you tonight answering questions, and I look forward to the discussion that I'm sure will come after the presentation. We'll try to keep things moving along so that we have plenty of time to discuss. So I want to start with the priorities and some highlights that are featured in this year's or next school year's fiscal plan. I want to begin with strategic priority 1. Many of you will recall, I've talked about it before when we visited, that we have a strategic plan for the Arlington Public Schools. It has 4 overarching priorities. Priority 1 is very focused on teaching and learning. And we're very focused also this year on some increasing enrollments at the secondary level. I'll talk about what that looks like in a few moments, but we need to support that because there are licensure requirements at different levels of education. And as students move into the secondary level, we need to make sure that they have the appropriately licensed teachers in front of them, and that we keep our class sizes and sections appropriately balanced. We're also focusing on allocating resources towards competitive compensation. Still, we did negotiate a really competitive teachers contract, and at this time last year, we're talking to you as we were starting that negotiations process. We did successfully come to agreement with our teachers and got an excellent agreement that raised accountability for our staff, as well as ensured that we got to average of town manager 12 on salary, at least for the time being. It's a difficult bar to keep hitting, but we were very pleased with what we were able to do with compensation, and we need to keep planning for that. We're bargaining with 3 units this year. We're also planning for accessible facilities and technology in all classroom spaces. We've worked very closely with the capital planning committee to talk about what the technology needs are in the system and make sure that we have the ability to give each classroom what it needs on the walls in terms of technology and for accessibility for students, as well as that the students need to have in front of them in order to access the curriculum. And we are working on implementing bargaining agreement terms in the AEA contract that require manageable caseloads for our service providers and balanced class sizes across our sections. And we're very pleased that this budget, for the first time since 2003, gives every school access to a full-time licensed librarian in a well-apportioned school library. It's been a long time since Arlington could say we had full-time licensed librarians in every school, and next school year we will be able to do that. So we're really excited about that. That's been in the strategic plan, and we've been working towards it for many years. So I want to start with enrollments. This is fiscal year 18 through fiscal 25 right now. And what you can see, we've shared this graph in lots of different iterations over the years, and it has a projection, that's the screen line, that we've been following for many years. And that projection we were tracking along with and actually outpacing for a while. And then the pandemic hit, and that's that blue line that dips below the green line. So these projections are beginning to be outdated. We're working on getting some new ones. But what you can see is that over the last several years, we have caught back up with that line when it comes to enrollment. We sort of expected that we would be leveling off to decreasing by now. But in FY25, we had an additional 115 or so students. And I have a couple of reasons why that I'll share with you. We think that the enrollment didn't do what we were sort of expecting it to do, level off, decrease. And I'll also talk about what's happening at elementary versus secondary, because there is a difference between what we're seeing as a trend at the elementary level and what we're seeing at the secondary level. This projection, the gray line, is our internal projection. It has a very strong tie to birth rate, which is why you see the drop off right here. Okay, and then this line is a separate projection we had commissioned in FY22, where it starts, and it was wrong, so we're not using it anymore for obvious reasons. So we are asking for, we're in the process of, we've actually done the RFP and hired a consultant. They're going to get us some new projections so that we can get a new version, hopefully of the screen line, which has been a really strong predictor of what has actually happened. And we're looking forward to having that and providing that in future years. So this is enrollments by elementary and secondary. The elementary line is the blue line. You can see that that has sort of followed that level off and begin to decrease trend. But it isn't quite as sharp as was originally predicted. And that red line is our secondary enrollments, and that has been on a very steady increase. This surpassed the elementary enrollment in FY24 when you, and it actually surpassed it in FY23 if you exclude monatomy. So if you take preschool, which is not regulatorily required, out, then this cross happened in FY23. If you include pre-K, it happened in FY24. Either way, we have more students now at secondary level than we do at the elementary level, and that bubble is moving through. It, you know, you can predict then that when some of those students begin to graduate, we will either be leveling off or beginning to decrease, but we need to sort of see how the trends play out. We do have decreasing birth rates, but we also have a high rate of families who've moved into the system. And so that's sort of making it difficult for folks to project, for some of these companies to project out what our enrollments are going to look like. It's not tracking with what some folks in the rest of the state are seeing. And one reason why we think that is because we're also seeing a trend towards an increasing percentage of Arlington families, families who live in Arlington and have school-age children, sending their students to Arlington Public Schools. This is a pleasing trend. We're happy with this. We love it that folks think that this is an excellent option for their students. But if you look at FY21, we were about 84-ish, 85% of families sending their students to APS. And now we're at a little over 90%. So we have a higher percentage of kids in town coming to Arlington Public Schools. And I'm going to show you also what that trend looks like across the secondary schools, because it varies across secondary schools as well. So the biggest impact of this is seen at Arlington High School. This is not super surprising. We have a beautiful new facility. And we imagine that that has something to do with the fact that families are choosing to send their students to Arlington High School. So that was an investment worth making for the community for sure. Families are telling us that with how they're enrolling their students. We're also seeing an increase at the middle level. At Gibbs, this sort of fluctuates mostly because there's only one class there. It would sort of level out if there was more than one class at Gibbs. So remember that this is just the 6th grade school. OMS is right here in the middle. That's the 7th and 8th grade school. We also have an increase there. We have some bigger classes moving through. over the last few years, but we also have more families who are keeping their kids at OMS. And then I also want to point out something about enrollment at the elementary level, because one of the things you'll notice is that there is a projected slight decrease in enrollment at the elementary level, and there's not a decrease in sections. We're actually planning for some additional sections at a couple of schools. And that is because of the enrollment trends at the school level. So if you look at the enrollment trends at the school level in 2020-21, there is a discrepancy between the smallest school, Pierce, 305 students, and the largest school, Thompson, with 479 students. That discrepancy has gotten wider over time. Thompson has grown over those years. We've prioritized over the last several years efficiency in elementary sections. Reduce where you can. If you recall, last year we had like a reduction of multiple sections of elementary classes, and that was because we were trying to keep the number of elementary sections overall relatively low. Unfortunately, what happens when you do that is that you don't balance the school, because we have 7 schools across the entire district, and we can try to keep the school at a relatively even size, or we can try to keep the sections as efficiently scheduled as possible, but they don't really go together. And we need to alleviate some space pressure at Thompson at this point. So we're really strategically using the buffer zone policy that the school committee put in place several years ago to redistribute students across the schools at the elementary level and try to get some of our K1 sections down a little bit, because we have a lot of kindergarten classes that are right up to our cap of 25 students, and they're headed into first grade. And one of the things we're seeing happen at first grade is we frequently have students come from private school or from pre-K where they went ahead and stayed for kindergarten and then come into the schools at first grade. So at first grade, if you have very tightly scheduled kindergarten sections, we're going to need additional sections at first grade over time in perpetuity, and that's not great to predict for. It'd be better if we had a little more room at K1, and then if we could reduce sections at grades 3, 4, 5 over time, we can look at doing that. And we have done that. And it's difficult sometimes for a class to go from being in smaller classes to larger classes, but they're older, and so it's easier for students to adapt to that. So we'd like to try this strategy this year, and I'll show you that it actually is maintaining average class size. So this is average class size in all grades over the last 4 years. And the total averaged out is right there in the middle of that black line. So this is not actually significantly impacting if we keep the number of sections even, the average of how big the classes are. If we didn't keep the sections even for next year, you actually would see this average go up slightly because the number of students in each class would be going up. But our school size would be very taxed by that as well, particularly at Thompson. So we need to swing students towards the west side of town because we don't have any room to put any more sections at Thompson. We simply can't do it. There's no more classrooms left. So that is a little overview of elementary enrollment. I'm happy to go into more detail at some point if it makes sense to do so. I want to talk a little bit about some of the other demands that we're seeing in the schools in terms of resourcing. We have, as part of the strategic plan, identified focal groups that we're very focused on ensuring get the services and support that they need to access the curriculum. And so this is part of our commitment to making sure that whatever service provision students need, they have access to that, that our students have a safe place to learn, that we're paying attention to the student experience as well as the academic outcomes, because we've seen that when students have a positive experience, they have positive academic outcomes, and we have the results that prove that. So our focal groups are students who have IEPs, students, families, and staff who identify as Black or Hispanic and Latino, students, families, and staff who identify as non-binary, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersexual, asexual, LGBTQIA+, big acronym. Students who are multilingual learners who are learning English and their families, and that also includes students and families who speak a language other than English as the primary language in the home, because when you speak a different language at home, sometimes that can create cultural differences at school that you need to figure out how to navigate, and students and families who are low income. We have federal funding linked to number 1 and number 5. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. Our focal group, but what I want to really emphasize here is that our focal group populations over the last several years have gone up from 26.5% high needs to 29.6% high needs this school year. And that was back in FY20, it was at 26%. So we're up to close to 30% high needs students in the schools. And that increase means additional required services, some of which are regulatory, are required by the state, some of which are not required by the state, but are excellent practice because it helps keep you from having more kids in this high needs category. I share high needs, this green line at the top, because it's an aggregate of all of those other categories of student. So it's one of the better ones to look at if you're thinking about resourcing, because the more students you have with significant needs in schools, the more likely it is that you're going to need additional resources to help them access the general curriculum. But you can also see students with IEPs has gone up from 15.9% to 17.7%, and that some of our other focal group areas have gone up as well. All right, Mr. Gorski, let's talk about money.
Sure. So the next several slides are related to funding and budget aspects. The first of these are revenue by funding sources. This pie chart shows funding summary breakdown by paragraph, sorry. Was up early today.
It's gonna be a pie chart next.
Pie chart following the bar. Funding summary shows breakdown of district funding changes throughout the past several budgets. COVID-19 is still out there, kind of a historical piece. It was part of the funding up through FY24. This also includes circuit breaker, special revenue, our revolving accounts, our grants, Chapter 7A, which is the second largest section. It's part of the town contribution, which the school district receives as part of our budget. In the pie chart, we see the funding sources for FY26 budget. The largest being by far obviously the town appropriation at just over 93%. We have about 3% in grants, about 1.7% in our revolving accounts, and just over 2% circuit breaker reimbursement from the state. Our next slide shows the proposed budget expense by spending category. So our budget is broken into budget transfer categories, which the school committee votes upon. You can see this is broken down by special ed, secondary education, other, which includes facilities and transportation, elementary education, curriculum instruction, and administration. One thing to note here is we're looking at this, you see a reduction to curriculum and instruction, and that's linked to a reorg, integration of new curriculum to regular practice, and an allocation of school-based literacy coaches to school budgets. So we, as part of our development of the FY26 budget, we did a fair amount of data cleanup and looking where positions should actually be placed more school-based than at a district level. The next slide is related to student service spending over FY22 to FY26. This includes special education, counseling, mental health services, academic intervention, homeless and special ed transportation, and English language services, integrated early childhood services, and professional development specific to student services.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just gonna, I'll hand it off to you. I was just gonna, as you can see here, on the general fund side, significant increase from FY22 to FY26, jumping from just over 26 million to over 37 million, and 11% increase from 25 to 26.
So that is reflective of the shifting needs of the student population. And I also wanted to point out that the long range plan has about a $34 million allocation related to student services to special education. We include, when we calculate that, all of the services that go into helping us prevent needing to put more extensive interventions in place for a student that might have an IEP. So that's why intervention, social work, those things are included here, because those people might also work with students who have IEPs. But I just wanted to note that that $34 million allocation that's in the long range plan, we're exceeding that when it comes to spending on special education and related services that are tied to meeting the needs of high need students. So it's meeting that requirement of the long range plan.
And you can see other elements there, including circuit breaker, some of our revolving accounts, and some of our grants. On the next slide, we have our FY26 anticipated federal funding. These are our entitlement grants. So we have Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and the IDA grants. The largest grant that the district receives is for IDA, support for students with IEPs. Just under 1.8 million we're expecting for FY26. The funds from the federal grants are provided as they are spent, so we have a grant drawdown throughout the year. It's based upon actual expenses, and they are received and dispersed to the LEAs by the state. So the federal government, these are federal grants that pass through the state and administered through the state, and then the districts go into the GEM system, which is the system which the state has created to actually draw down grant revenue. Next slide is how are the Arlington Public Schools spending our federal funding? So the biggest impact on our federal funding is about $1.9 million related to salaries, compensation, contracted services, and contractual benefits. We also have, there's a portion of our federal grants, particularly IDA, that goes for private school proportionate share, and then smaller amounts for supplies and program leadership. One of the questions that had come up at one of our budget subcommittee meetings is what would happen if the federal government decided to cut back on certain grant spending. So that's one of the reasons that we included this slide, but we certainly would have to take a look at what reductions would mean and how they would affect the budget, and have to talk about planning for that.
We also got some questions about planning for when we plan for staffing additions, planning for contractual benefits attached to that, because the town does absorb contractual benefits for FTEs that are on the general fund. We have, however, started incorporating for some of these large federal grants, the contractual benefits for the staff members that are charged to those grants into the grant spending itself. And so what you see here is this 125,000 is actually the benefits that are attached to the positions that are charged to that grant. So we're trying to take some of the impact off of the town of some of those contractual benefits. Something we've been working with them on extensively for a while. We do that also with a number of enterprise funds. But part of why we point out here that federal grants are provided, those funds as they are spent, is because we don't get the money up front. We draw it down as we go. And so what will happen in the event that federal funding were to be compromised for Arlington is that we will have already promised a salary to people, and we will already be paying that salary out of that grant. And we will go to draw down funds from the grant, and we won't be able to do so. And so that is how a lot of local municipalities are finding that they're struggling with some of these federal freezes to funding. And we would need to do a really quick pivot to adjust for that. So we are planning, as Mr. Gursky noted, to do some scenario planning this summer to think about how we would go about absorbing that. But one of the major allocations we've made in the FY26 budget is on the operational side of things. There are several reasons for that we'll talk through. But it is also to give us some of that room, if necessary, to be able to cover salary and contractual obligations in the event we would need to, should there be any issues with federal funding. Now, we have also heard that funding attached to low-income students, which is title grants, which is one of our bigger grants, and funding attached to special education won't be part of what has been going on at the federal level. I think that remains to be seen, so I do think it's important to do some contingency planning, but we wanted the committee to know that we are thinking about this and what the impact would potentially be, however, moving forward with the plan, with the funding that we anticipate we would have for FY26. All right.
So we shift gears to our FY26 budget. And this is a budget summary, which I will walk through and then turn over to the superintendent to talk about specific positional adds. So starting at the top here, we have the number from the long range plan, the FY26 town allocation, the 103, 630, 672, which reflects a $7.1 million increase over the FY25 budget for the school department. Our breakdown for this budget is salaries, total salaries for FY '26 at $88,781,887. This is almost a $5.3 million increase over FY '25. For our operations and management budget, for FY '26, we have $14,848,786. And that reflects just over a $1.8 million increase over FY '25 for the same budget. For the ops, we have increases for out-of-district tuition and transportation of just over $433,000. The inflation rate for this is set at the state by OSD. It is not quite as high as it's been the past couple of years. It was for about a decade, it was an inflation rate of just around 2%. And then districts were hit with sticker shock when it was 14% a couple of years ago. It has started to come down. It's still higher than it's been in the past. It's still about double what that rate has been. This also reflects the possibility of a few additional students going out to private placement. We have our anticipated utility increases of just over $300,000. This is a number that we received from Talia Fox, the sustainability manager on the town side. We have our department budget, which are the operations and management on our department budgets. This includes our schools and other department budgets. That's an increase of about $446,000. And then we have other operational additions, which we will go through. There are some that we broke out that we thought were important to be funded. And then we have our year-over-year salary increase, which includes our COLA, our additions and efficiencies. And that's the just under 5.3 million that I highlighted, the year-over-year change for salaries. And there's a breakdown here underneath which shows the number of staffing additions, the 45.3 FTEs, and the associated dollar figure. There's previous additions of 3.1 FTEs that are part of the budget, or part of the school roster this year, but were unbudgeted and need to be added into the budget for FY '26. And there are staffing efficiencies adjustments. There's a minus 19.2 FTEs. It comes down to a bottom line of an addition of 29.1 FTEs. And we come down to the
Alright, so I'm gonna talk through some of these. I'm not going to go through the full list and explain every single one, because we'll be here most of the night if I do that. However, I am happy to talk through some of the considerations that went into the requests. I do want to note that in FY '25, when we brought the budget, there were almost zero additions of staff that had not been already needed as part of that fiscal year that we were currently in as part of fiscal '24. So there is a bit of a correction happening, because one of the things we didn't know last year was what was going to happen with bargaining. And we were about to open up bargaining. So we did a large allocation towards salaries, unsure about what the bargaining outcome would be, and therefore what we would actually be able to add. We didn't add very many positions over the course of the past year. I have the sort of previous additions. That's actually this slide. These are the previous additions, the stuff that was needed this year that we did add because we had the space after we did the negotiations. And it was all really tied to enrollment. Actually, the school nurse was something that was on grant during COVID. The enrollment has increased significantly at the high school to warrant 3.0 school nurses. And should have been included in the FY '25 budget and was not. So in the data cleanup process, we discovered that it's now reflected in the data. So some of this is data cleanup, but all of these, the world language teacher was section requirements because of student enrollment in sections. So we added a Mandarin teacher. The communication specialist was actually included in this fiscal year's budget at no additional cost because of the salary offset. We're including the cost here just so it's reflected. And you can see what the cost is, but there was somebody who left and somebody who joined, and the person who left had more experience than the person who joined, so financially it canceled itself out. We added PE teachers at Ottoson because PE classes were huge, an occupational therapist that was required, assistive technology that was required, and physical therapy that was required for student IEPs. So this is all of the additions that happened in FY '25. they're reflected here because they're included as additions because they were not reflected in the 25 budget that came before you prior. But we're doing a bit of catch up on enrollment because enrollment had been increasing at the secondary level, but we hadn't gone ahead and added positions last year because we were concerned about how bargaining was going to play out. So we also have some efficiencies that I'll walk through a little bit. One of the things to note about a couple of these efficiencies and adds is, for example, with librarians. It looks like a lot more taken out than actually is being taken out, and that's because we're resetting. So they were sort of allocated all over the district, and now we're going to allocate at a school. So we just took all of those positions out of the budget, and then we're putting them all back in. So the numbers are also a little artificially high on the ads because we put all the librarians back into the budget so that we actually have 11.0 at all of the schools. And we took all of the elementary ones out because they are not school-based right now. And so they're reflecting these efficiencies. But also included, so that resetting, that's the resetting. But also included in the efficiencies is a reduction to our paraprofessionals in the libraries because our paraprofessionals in the libraries have been running libraries for a long time. They don't have a library license. They've been doing a spectacular job. They're some of our highest paid library paraprofessionals, some of our highest paid paraprofessionals in the district. And they've known for a long time that when we have full-time librarians, we may need to recalculate our staffing allocation. We've told everybody that is having a reduction to library paraprofessional time that they'll have a job in the district. We have plenty of TA positions and we're able to put a 0.4 with something else. But at the elementary level, we're going to reduce to 0.4 at all of the elementary libraries so that the librarian has some support a couple days a week, 0.5 at the middle school level. So there's a reduction to offset some of the addition of library services in the form of licensed professionals. Overall, it's an add of about $20,000 once you take out some of the FTEs, put some back, and even it all out. That's the net dollars. We're reducing building substitutes. We had significantly increased the number of building substitutes we had during the pandemic. It is useful to have these folks because teachers get sick. Turns out kids get sick a lot. I don't know if any of you have these creatures in your home, but they bring their germs to school. So having building subs is very useful. However, we know that this is a nice to have. And so we're starting to signal to folks that nice to haves won't necessarily always be there. And we've made a slight reduction to building substitutes. The math intervention is actually a grant funded role that we don't want to plan to keep. We want to plan to keep it on the grant and keep it at the level that we can afford to have it on the grant instead of committing to having more than that. We're also doing a role restructuring at central office that will result in more clerical support in HR and finance, less administrative assistant support in the superintendent's office, and just trying to make sure that we can do as much as we possibly can at central office to keep headcount even, but support the schools in the best way possible. So I'm going to talk through a few of the additions. These are all at AHS and OMS, so you'll see the reflection of the impact of increasing enrollments in these additions pretty significantly. We're going to need to add sections absolutely across core content areas, but we're still gathering all of the kids' course selections. So we're not 100% sure where all of those will get allocated. It will be based on what the students choose for their coursework, where we put those sections. It is looking like there will be new sections, new teachers in math, English, science, history, world language, the core subjects essentially. And that will allow for us to keep class sizes under 25 in those core areas. We're adding a dean. The deans work directly with students to make sure that they have what they need to register for classes. If there's an issue with a student or a family, the deans are the first response to a lot of those situations, aside from the counselors who work very closely with the deans as well. We're also adding a school counselor at the high school and at OMS. What that's going to allow at OMS is a more sort of structured approach model to the staffing so that the counselors can work directly with learning communities to support the students' needs. We're planning on an additional custodian at the high school because it's a huge facility and they require some more support to make sure that it's staying in excellent shape for all of our community members. We're adding special education teachers at both AHS and OMS. That's going to allow us to keep keep our caseloads manageable, keep our class sizes manageable in those spaces where we do co-teaching with a special education teacher and a core area teacher available because it's in a student's IEP. And some of the other things are tied to programming. We're building in a performing arts media class to use some of the media production spaces at AHS. We partner with ACMi on a lot of that programming and are excited to incorporate this into the program of studies. We're adding specialists at OMS and more electives to try to cut down on the number of directed studies, which are sort of, they don't count towards learning time, they're just sort of fillers in a student's schedule. We don't love that that's there. We'd like our middle school students to have more choice about what they're able to take and to drive down some of the sizes of classes in the specialty areas. Our tech classes in particular have been huge this year. And it's not well balanced. We did okay balancing, and the core areas we have not done as well with that in some of the specialty areas. So we need to correct for that. So that's where some of those are coming from. At the secondary level also, we are doing a readjustment of some of the administrative roles at Gibbs and OMS. We have had actually really excellent retention of special education administrators, coordinators over the last several years, except at middle school. And in that one role, we've had a lot of turnover. We'd really like to correct for that. So we're redesigning that role. We didn't want to add a full 1.0. That didn't make a lot of sense. So we're sharing at Gibbs that 0.5 coordinator with a 0.5 assistant principal and allocating one full-time coordinator to OMS for special education oversight. And that the way that kind of works out is a 0.5 additional AP and a 0.5 additional coordinator overall. Happy to explain that if folks would like. We're adding some social work support and balancing out the caseloads for social work at the elementary level using both the METCO grant allocation and this addition that is shared between Bishop and Stratton. So it's 0.5 at Dallin, Pierce, Bishop, Stratton, 2 of them on the METCO grant, 2 of them on the general fund. And we're trying to be really purposeful with how we use our grant funds to support the schools by doing that. And they're the librarians. Like I said, this is a little bit false of an ad. It's actually 3.0 overall, but because of how the data operate, we took them out, put them back. So it's a little higher than it actually is in terms of the number of people. Reserve is there to help us balance where we might have enrollments that are unanticipated at the moment. Particularly if we need an additional section. We're watching a couple of spots at the elementary level where we're very, very close to the line, particularly in first grade. And a lot of the additional resources here are to support kindergarten section at Hardy, special education programming at Hardy, and needed specialist sections in some select areas. And then finally, at the district level, we need another school bus driver. We drive all over the place. We do a lot of field trips. We really save a lot of money compared to some of our neighbor colleagues on the fact that we have our own transportation department in Arlington. To hear my colleagues talk about what special education out of district transportation costs them these days and the inflation rate is out of this world, and we're able to keep that more manageable. It's not easy to manage, but it's more manageable in Arlington because of our model for transportation. So this is the thing I love the most, frankly, about being a superintendent here is that we have our own transportation department. But we definitely need another driver. It's going to alleviate some of the pressure on the Gibbs morning run, on the Odison additional run that we've put in, and on some of the during the day transportation and after school extracurricular transportation. The central office restructure is reflected there. Remember, there were 5 out. There's 5 back in. It's really only 4 full-time. The 5th one is a stipend that is a partnership that allows us to do some superintendent training in partnership with Harvard's Grad School of Education. So that doesn't go up, it doesn't inflate, it's one amount. But it does increase our capacity because it gives us a full-time FTE with, almost doctoral education for about $50,000. So it's a good way to get some good work done without a ton of investment financially in it. And then these last few were in partnership with the town, and the last couple are reallocations and stipends to avoid putting full-time positions in, and instead we can do a stipend role. The food service monitors reallocation was money that had come out of the budget onto food services for a period of time. We had a little there after the pandemic that had been allocated by grants from federal government that we could spend. And so we had put monitoring for lunch monitors and breakfast monitors there. And then we negotiated with Unit D to build that into the Unit D contract. And so we need to put it back so that we're paying for it because food services can't sustain it for an extended period of time. And these are some of the operational adjustments that we're also adding in. Some of this is athletic coaching stipends. I know we had a question about athletics that we're happy to dig into in a moment. We have network monitoring upgrade and cloud backup that was requested explicitly by IT. These are changes the town has made that we're gonna allocate some dollars to mirror on the school side. The science department needs more money because the little baby pigs that they dissect are very expensive and getting more expensive, as are the chemicals. So in order for us to have really rich lab classes, sorry, I know that dissecting pigs is probably not something you thought you were gonna talk about today, but it is very costly, and the chemicals attached to all of the science classes are also costly, but those labs are really rich learning experiences. So we wanna be able to do them with the students, and we need additional resources for that. Cartwheel care is something we've done this year. It gives very immediate social work services or therapy services to a family, a student, a teacher. It's been an excellent resource to have in the district because we can plug somebody into mental health support right away while we work on getting them more permanent mental health support. And so this is capturing, we had it on a grant for an extended period of time. This is capturing a little bit of the funding that we can't cover by a grant next year. Zoom's been on the budget for a while. We've been paying for it, but we hadn't actually captured it as a line item. So we're memorializing that it's actually in the budget. This is a significantly reduced cost though. We had spent about $100,000 on it for many years. We're gonna reduce the number of licenses, use the webinars feature for school committee meetings, but this is actually a pretty significantly reduced cost for Zoom. We're also, and I'll just point these last couple things out, some of these are, have previously been student devices, para devices, production machines, maintenance and refresh equipment have been capital items in the past. We've been working with capital committee to understand what some of the demands are in terms of some of the sustainability goals of the town, some of the facilities demands, and we understand that some of those are really significant. And that devices are shifting in terms of how we use them with students. They're more disposable these days. They're embedded in the curriculum. And so we're trying to think about ways that we can build sustainability for one-to-one devices and staff devices into what we're planning for in the budget. So there's an allocation there for us to get some of that work started and think about with the school committee and the long-range committee and the capital committee about what that would look like in the longer term. So those are all the operational additions. Just to wrap up, the budget that we have proposed includes and fulfills plans for that third and final allocation from the FY24 override. We had talked a lot about expanding deeper learning opportunities, student choice, making sure that we have the services that students require, and ensuring that we could competitively pay staff. We have worked towards all of those goals, and we think that they're well reflected in this budget. It plans for some of the operational needs of the system and starts to integrate the cost of regular maintenance and devices into that general fund budget. It significantly increases support for special education, social work, balance sections across all of our classes at secondary level, allows us to fulfill bargaining agreements, and balances our salaries at 85.6% of the overall budget by putting a lot of our resources towards some operational costs in FY25. Just for reference, salaries were 88.2% of the budget. We're really aiming for more like 82%, but some of our compensation demands have required us to put more money towards compensation. The sustainability of that is something I think about a lot, so we're trying to put more dollars towards operations this year. And we are happy to take any questions.
Questions? No questions?
Rebecca.
Thank you. We had heard previously that in bargaining with the teachers, there had been this addition of a personal day or something as a group to reward them for decreasing staff absenteeism. Is there a brief update on how the staff absenteeism is going and is that working?
Sure, so they are right at that line right now. So the way that it's a attendance incentive essentially. And the way that it works in the contract language is that the target set by the state for student attendance is 95%. You don't want students to miss more than 9 days of school per year. So we said, okay, as a unit, if all of our teachers hit that mark, 95% attendance, then it's because, you know, personal time is a very highly valued thing for staff, and the ability to have some flexibility around taking the time if, you know, you have a flood in your basement is well valued. So we said, okay, if you can hit that 95%, then you'll earn that third personal day the following year. The personal days count, sick days count, professional days count. A lot of things count towards this 9 days. And it's in aggregate, it's as a whole unit. So it's basically how many of you were there, how many days could you possibly have worked? Did you hit 95% of that actually coming into work? It has required us to really sharpen our data practices because we have to keep track of ins and outs and resignations and everything as part of that calculation. And they're right at the line right now. If they earn it, then they get that personal day next year, but they still have to hit the 95% to get it the next year. So it's each year. It's not earned in perpetuity after 1 year. What we really like about this is a shared accountability mechanism built into the contract. It helps us prioritize attendance in a way that does it for the whole unit in aggregate, so it doesn't sort of unfairly disadvantage a parent of a young child, for example, who might be more likely to be out. The unit can sort of take care of each other by working together towards this goal. And it was a very innovative contract proposal, and as far as I know, we're the only ones who have it. And it's going pretty well. It has definitely improved staff attendance this year, which is part of what makes us confident we can eliminate building substitutes and be okay.
That's what I was gonna ask about. Thank you. Yeah. Great, thank you.
Other questions? Paul?
Thank you. Under student services, there was a new line for student health. It's not a big line, but what is that?
I believe that is a grant. Yes,
Yes,
student health,
yes.
okay. And I'm not 100% sure exactly what all goes into that. I'm more than happy to follow up with you and let you know. But I believe that's a health grant that the nursing department received last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Could they have more PE because of it, or they?
Oh, no, it's
lunches,
it's for the nursing department. So I think it's covering some staff salary needs, but I would have to go double check it, but it's for the nursing department. It's not health curriculum and PE.
Okay.
I'll toss them.
It was either last year or 2 years ago, Boston Globe had a big article that basically said if you want an excellent reading program, you go to Mississippi. And in response, you had said that you're working on that and you will, by this time, have a full science-based reading program that will keep our kids right on the cutting edge. And so my question is, do you have that?
Yes, I'm so excited that you asked that. So this year we rolled out EL Education, which is a science reading based curriculum. A lot of the research around student reading and how students learn how to read says that you have to build student schema and knowledge around a topic. So what that means for little kids is that you actually have to dig into a topic and read all sorts of different kinds of text about that topic, because they build the vocabulary, they build the understanding of how the text operates, like this is a nonfiction text versus this is a fiction text. But you actually shouldn't read all nonfiction texts. Some of you experienced this in school, I promise, where you just did your nonfiction unit and you spread all these nonfiction texts, and those of you who love stories hated that unit. And then you did your poetry unit and you just read a bunch of poetry, and those of you who hated poetry hated that unit, and then you moved on to narrative text and you learned about stories and plots and all of that. We don't teach like that anymore. So we did not too long ago. But now what we'll do with, my son actually is experiencing the same curriculum in Newton. They'll read about tools or toys for an extended period of time in kindergarten, but they'll read all sorts of different texts about that topic. In 5th grade, they do a whole human rights unit, and they read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They read a narrative text of this human rights story, Esperanza Rising. They do a lot of reading about specific events throughout the world where human rights have been violated. And then they do a performance task at the end of the unit where they show off what they know in different kinds of ways and have some creative license over where they go. It's a great example of tasks with a high ceiling, because you can challenge a student to however high they want to fly, and you can scaffold up to the task for students who might struggle with it. But this is how we teach ELA and literacy in the schools now. We also have phonics foundations, like do those sort of foundational teaching tasks, but the core curriculum is built around sort of building that knowledge base and schema over an extended period of time with multiple different types of texts to help students gain an understanding of how different texts and topics operate together in the world. And it's going swimmingly. It's been a lot for the teachers. They've done a lot of work. They've had a lot of professional development. We've dedicated hours upon hours of professional development to this effort. We've had consultants come in. Part of what you see is the curriculum and instruction reduction for FY26 is because we're not putting as much dollars towards this effort next year. We're still going to be doing some PD with teachers. It's ongoing work, but the rollout was this year and it's been fairly successful. We look forward to seeing the outcomes.
And finally, you're probably aware the town is going to be needing an override to the tune of probably $20 million next year for fiscal 27. You could approach it one of just asking for the whole amount, which I don't think anybody has ever done before, or reducing the increases. You don't get 7% special ed, you get 3.5%, something like that. Has there been any discussion in the school community about how to approach this?
So part of why we mentioned, and you have from that. Sorry, let me say this and then I'll ask you guys
Okay,
that.
sure.
Sorry. So part of why we mentioned that we want to do some scenario planning over the summer is for this reason. It's both because we want to be ready if we someday find that we can't pull the federal grants down, and because we imagine we may need to build 2 budgets next year and think about what the outcome would be if we were to not pass an override. And we want to have a tool that we can use to model different scenarios and imagine, if we removed these positions, what would the impact be? If we remove, and part of also why we're building so much operational cost into this year's budget is because it is more difficult when you're working with kids to remove some of the people surrounding the services that they receive. We're going to be challenged though, because we have requirements around steps and lanes. These are agreed upon contracts that we have to meet. We have requirements around special education that are regulated around what the services that we have to provide. And we would have to figure out how we operate in that system with costs that are never at 2.5%, 2%. Our contracts go up 5% every year because of steps and lane adjustments. So one of the things we do to mitigate this is try to encourage our administrators when we're doing the hiring to hire in at step 1, and not, people who have years and years and years of experience. And they've been pretty good about that. They require clearance to hire anybody above step 4 from me. And we try to do what we can as we launch the year to, if we find that a resource is not required, to not fill it just to fill it. And I think those are some of the things we're really thinking about as we head into next year because of some of the financial uncertainty that we realize is on the horizon.
Thank you.
No, I think you covered it. I would have The steps and lanes are a big, obviously a big part of it, and on the upside, as you mentioned, obviously, that was one of the things that was mentioned to me because it was held pretty flat or even reduced in the 25 budget, so principals and department heads were looking for additional resources for FY 26, but obviously going forward, we're in the admin for, the administration for the school department, well aware what's happening in other districts, like Brookline, Milton, and Andover is the latest, looking at some budget challenges.
Okay, thank you.
So, going back to the federal money that you received, how many positions are supported by that funding?
How quick are you with this?
Is it a raise?
Yeah, hold on. I got it right here. 84.
84, all of
Five
their?
for all grants. Oh, wait, nope, that includes revolving. Bad number, don't listen to that one, hold on. About, so on the sped grant, about 14. That'd be the 240 grant. On the pre-K grant, 1.8.
16.
Entitlement grants, like federal title grants, 3.4. About 5.3 total on all the title grants. So,
21, 22. Okay.
yeah.
And
about
some of
that.
those positions are not full-time, it sounds like? Or is that?
Some of them are not full-time, yeah.
Okay. So, of all the services that those federal grants are covering, how many of them do you see as a priority if that money goes away?
All of them.
All of them. So we would have to make cuts elsewhere to cover that money.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that, or is that projecting too far in the future?
It'd be hard to project it with any level of specificity. We take a look at class sizes. It's, a lot of those positions are regulatorily required by an IEP. And or are not as, like, to have them is more impactful than to raise a class size by 3 or 4 or 5 students. And so it's not that that's not negatively impactful, but
Right.
that's one of the places
And
where
our
we can look at.
classroom spaces would handle that increase in class size.
The classroom spaces in different buildings would handle it differently.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things we'd also have to look at is where do we have capacity for slightly larger sections. And also, if you think about where the specialized programs are, they have a different degree of ability to handle that because they might have students pushing in and out throughout the day. And so we'd be strategic about where we make cuts like that increase class size, because depending on what the programming is at the school, it could be differently impactful to kids.
And do we think there's any federal money hidden in the chapter 70 money? Or we don't know?
We know.
What do we know about it?
So, it's funny you say that because I was just clicking on it. Right? So the federal government is really quirky when it comes to their money. Like, the old call, it's like, what's a federal dollar? It originates with the federal government until it gets spent, it's a federal dollar. So large chunks of the money, that what they're referring to as federal money, are actually passed through block grants from DESI, right? So it's appropriated from the feds to the state, and the state drops it down to the school. Right, to the town. Very little of the federal money we get is directly given to the town of Arlington.
Yes, no, I get that, but I guess what I'm asking is, then there's the state.
It's in there, that's part of it,
It's
that's
part
what's
of
coming through, right? Anything they're getting is part of that.
Is part of chapter 70?
No, it's part of
Chapter
the
70 is
state
direct
appropriation.
appropriation.
So
Yes.
we've been asking this question because this is on a lot of superintendents and finance committees' minds right now. And I don't have a equation straight answer quite yet about what, and I think some of that's because the state's not clear how what the impact would be, for example, on how they allocate chapter 70 should there be any kind of cut to Massachusetts as a whole funding that's coming from the federal government. And so we're not sure about that, but like I do think it's worth noting that there's the federal dollars that we get in a grant that comes to us through the state that we know is a federal grant. And then there's the funding that we get from the state
Where we don't know how much is federal.
that we're not clear exactly how they source, though I'm sure that there's a way to figure this out. But like, I am not clear exactly how all that gets sourced, and so what the impact would potentially be should the state have a decrease in federal funding.
Okay. So then I guess my other question is, are you having any trouble pulling down federal reimbursement now?
We have had one grant frozen, that is pretty minor. It's a grant that is for professional development, for teachers who are interested in furthering their careers and becoming administrators. They did, equity was in the name of the organization. I assume that that's why it was frozen. The organization that housed it said, we no longer, we can't draw down our funds, we don't have funds to provide you, we're shutting down, program's over. So, and it's unfortunate because it was one of our initiatives under our second priority, which is valuing all staff and giving staff pathways to advance their careers. And it was providing us a avenue for doing that, and now we're not doing that, and staff who were doing it were really enjoying it, and we're very devastated that the program was shut down. And it, you know, there was really nothing we could do about it. We found out about it one afternoon.
Okay.
And that was it.
So you have a plan for potential federal cuts from the direct grants, and we need to get some information from the state about
We have a plan to make a plan,
the plan.
which is not a very satisfying answer.
Oh,
But
it's a perfectly satisfying answer right now,
I'm glad.
because whatever your plan is, it's not gonna apply a week from now, so.
We do have some folks at central office, actually, some interns who have a finance background, who are coming to us from the Harvard program, who we don't pay, but who know finance exceptionally well, who are gonna help us with some of this modeling and have applied to a grant through Harvard, which we'll see if they get and or if it gets funded, but that would allow them to work with us on Harvard's dime over the summer to build out some of these models.
So when you say modeling, you're gonna build a spreadsheet model, or you're gonna build a?
Yes, I mean, a data model that allows us to plug things in and out and
Yeah.
think about what the impact would be. What I'm hoping to do is plug into that both the finances and staffing and ratios. So like, if we were to cut this, what do the class sizes do? If we were to cut that, what do the class sizes do? Like, have it actually propagate some of those results. They're starting to think about what that would be like, so.
Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Holman, for a very comprehensive and interesting presentation. Great. I have 2 to 3 questions. The first is, going back to your slides 17 to 19, I remain confused over the 19 reductions, 19.2 efficiency reductions, which save $469,000, and the 45 new positions at 3.4 million. And the, you know, just from a high level view, the new positions are at a $76,000 annual salary, and the reductions are at $24,000 annual salary. And I know that's sort of it may be irrelevant because of the way those columns add up, but why do you call it 19 reductions when you're really adding a chunk of money there in one of those slides? I'm trying to understand the rationale.
So, I just realized that this should have been a negative, which doesn't matter. 'Cause
My
I don't
question
calculate up
clear?
here. I just realized something that, first of all, our efficiencies number wasn't accurate. It's 1.2 million. Because it doesn't matter because it's not calculating, and the COLA was calculated entirely separately. But I just realized that a number that should have been a negative on that efficiency slide was a positive. And so that was not accurate. But it's a minus 1.2 million on the efficiencies.
Oh, not 400,000,
No,
minus
yes,
1.2 million,
yes,
okay.
because
That's all I need to know.
because the 400,000 on the roll restructure was a positive, but in the spot where we summed that up, and it should have been a negative in the spot where we summed that up.
Okay,
So
so that's at least in the same.
that's
ballpark.
not right. But it's, the COLA number is accurate because it's not baked into that sum.
I got it, thank you.
But what I will also, but I do actually want to name that there are a number of, we have different salaries in the system, so some of the salaries are para salaries that are closer to that 30,000 mark a year, and then some of them are teacher salaries, which are the 75, we budgeted 75. And so for example, under the librarian, resetting FTEs K to 8, and then the paraprofessional reduction, the paraprofessional salaries are at that 34 mark, and the teacher salaries are at the 75 mark. And we also budget the central office roles differently from those based on whatever the average is at the time for any new hires. So we based that, what we budget each different kind of role on the average incoming new from the previous year to guess at where to budget it. And so you're seeing a combination in those efficiencies and additions of all those different roles and how we budget each one at a different
But
level.
the savings is actually larger, is what you're telling me.
There's a larger savings there,
And
and
that
I'll
number
send a
at the
corrected
bottom.
document
Okay,
once we've got
That's
it
where I
done.
was-
Sorry about that.
a little confused. The second question has two parts. One is, could you please update us on where we are on the achievement gap? And are you, or have you measured the budget against your metrics in the strategic plan 18 months ago?
I would love to do that. I don't have a methodology for that yet. We have seen improvements in some areas. I'd have to pull up the outcomes report from last fall. You asked this question last year too.
I did.
And I sent you the outcomes report, I recall. We have another one of those, and I'm happy to send that to you. We're seeing improvements. I think one of the challenges we're encountering is that so when you close an achievement gap, pretend you guys are reading it this way. Okay, you want the line to go this way, up, right, for all the kids. We measure the achievement gap by saying, okay, here's where all students are, here's where one of our focal groups are. We want to see both of these lines trending up. In a lot of cases, we see both lines trending up. The problem we have is that this bottom line, so let's say this is low-income students, and this is non-low-income students, is that we're seeing this line do this. It's going up at a faster rate than this line, which is going up, positive, but we need this line to accelerate because that's how you close a gap, right? And you want it to do that. And I actually have graphs that show you these lines, not with my arms. But one of the challenges that happens with low-income families in particular, and this is where we're having the most trouble closing a gap, is that the social, like there's a wealth gap that's increasing with time. And we also don't advertise to our teachers, so we're working on this now, who those kids are, because we worry about harm to the students by making that information identificatory. It's difficult to focus on a focal group when you don't know who's in the focal group. So we're working on that with teachers and trying to make data more transparent without basically introducing assumptions about kids that have a negative impact then on their achievement and make it worse. So I do think in special education, we've seen some pretty significant improvements in this area, and I can go looking and send you some data on that. Because we're doing more inclusion, because the teachers know who those kids are. And we are doing more professional development with teachers to teach them de-escalation strategies so that the behavior doesn't get in the way of having them participate in core instruction. I'm partially excited to see next year's outcomes because of the literacy curriculum. Because one of the things the literacy curriculum requires is that you do not pull students out of the module block lesson, which is the grade level content lesson. We used to do a lot of that, where we would pull students out to provide them with reading services, for example, during the grade level content lesson. That's problematic because if they're not in the grade level content lesson, they don't have access to grade level content, you're never gonna close the gap. Because the gap is measuring against grade level. So if they're not there for the learning, guess what? They don't learn. And same is true if they're absent. So we've been really focused on absenteeism. We've seen really positive trends over the course of this year with regards to student absenteeism. They're coming to school more consistently. That's gonna have a positive impact on achievement. So in those areas where we've seen attendance increase, where we've seen inclusion increase, we are seeing the gap decrease for students with IEPs. In those places where we haven't seen that trend, we started digging in on strategies and resources to address that trend. Thompson has the highest needs population in the district, the most students in an elementary school, and an additional administrative assistant next year to help them respond to chronic absenteeism. And it's explicitly intended to help them with those efforts because it's one of the things that's having an impact on that achievement gap. So we're trying to allocate resources in a way that we see some data that show promise for a particular set of strategies if we think there's a resource gap there that's leading to some of the achievement gaps. But I don't know of any districts that do have a sort of ROI measure that's very good or reliable on resources to outcomes, but I'd like to get us there.
So the reason I ask the question is that I think over the last decade, through various superintendents, the idea of closing the achievement gap has been an underlying philosophy in the development of school budgets, and it's very laudable. I'm just concerned that we will continue to say, I'll use the term invest in that, but we may not be able to achieve the closing of the gap. And so that I think we need to think about whether that's the right objective or not. And that's all I want to say. I don't have anything else to suggest. But in my mind, it's just a big part of our school philosophy, and it's a good part.
Yeah.
But can we get there is the question. You don't have to answer the question. It's all right, that's,
Food for
you
thought.
can write a book on that.
I
John,
could easily.
John?
Yes, thank you also for a great presentation, also for a nice, concise, easy to read budget. I know you guys put a lot of work into that. Following up on the questions I sent over earlier today, I think you did get back to us on quite a few of them, but there's just a couple I want to maybe dig into a bit. So the first is on the net new hires of 31. Like that's roughly, I mean, depending on I guess how you present it, but roughly 31 new hires heading into next year. You know, how do we consider the additional costs, the pensions, the healthcare, and so on and so forth? What budget does that just assume that the insurance is going to pick it up? And then B, kind of a question that wasn't in there this morning is you had mentioned that next summer heading into the override, you're going to have to start to plan almost two budgets, with the override, without the override. Like realistically, you know, with the need for an override coming soon, wouldn't we be better off with maybe not 31 new hires this year? Like, wouldn't, you know, once you hire these people, they're, you know, they're employees, they're part of the union, so on and so forth. Wouldn't we be better heading into the override with maybe 15 new employees?
So expenditure of the funds provided and meeting the demands of both our contracts and the strategic plan wouldn't have allowed us to add 15 and
So the 15, the 31 are pretty much like that's what the law says.
I mean, some of these are to meet contractual demands.
Yeah.
So not what the law says, but what the law says insofar as we signed a contract with teachers that says we need to balance the ratio of students with IEPs to students not with IEPs in a given class, secondary level.
So
And then we have
required, sure.
IEPs that are written a certain way, and so we have to provide services in a way that's built into the IEP, and so all of those are contracts.
Yep.
Not necessarily state regulation, but you know, we're bound,
Obligations, sure.
obligated to do that. The what was the first part of your question?
Yeah, it totally, was the insurance, et cetera, maybe if you wanna put that aside until.
Well, I work directly with Mr. Feeney on that.
Okay,
They have a formula, so I started speaking with him as we were building about a month ago about what our net add of FTEs was gonna be. And then they have a formula to predict how many of those new FTEs would actually take insurance, because not everybody does.
Yeah.
And so they're very informed about where we're at, because the town's budget has the health insurance benefits on it. And so that's kind of how we plan for that, so we've been aware
so
that was
the
coming
town
up.
manager's involved in that discussion and that analysis months ahead of time.
Yeah.
As you guys put up the numbers. Okay,
I think the other thing that's important and what's tricky with this one, right, is that, and Dr. Holman mentioned this is like the third, talking about like promises, like this was the third tranche of that override commitment, right? Where we went to voters and said, we need X, Y, and Z, we're gonna invest in our schools to fulfill the needs of the strategic plan, right? So we can't come back at this point and say, well, we know there's gonna be another override, so we're gonna sort of not fulfill the commitments,
but
like,
if it just,
we
it
have an
sounds like,
obligation to
sounds
do
like there's
that,
three layers of obligations, which are all very important, but you get the legal obligation, you can't mess around with that. Then you have the union obligations, also can't mess around with that. Then you have the commitments in connection with the override. And I mean, I say this all the time and people get sick of hearing it, but I would say that the override that was on the ballot was a general override, and I mean, shall the town be allowed to assess an additional $7 million in real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of funding the operating budgets of the town and public schools. So I would question, whether those, I mean, in fact, I'm quite confident that they're not, legally binding or anything. I think it was a general override. So, I would, but it's nice to lay out the three different layers of obligations. And so that's where the 31 new hires come from is those three different layers of obligations.
Yes.
Anything else, John?
Yeah, and actually maybe just, I think there's gonna be a much quicker answer is the sports. It sounds like that was just a presentation issue.
That's a formula that didn't carry through
Yep.
in the planning, that we're gonna go back and assess it's a contractual stipends
Yep.
line and make sure that we have that all accounted for. But
Got it.
I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah, no, it's one of the many great things about the Arlington Public Schools.
We're absolutely not cutting athletics, that's
Yeah, excellent.
part of the plan for FY '26.
Thank you very much.
Health testing.
Just a quick question, how do you see your relationship with Minuteman? And as far as students going there, and have you met the new superintendent?
I haven't yet, but we are in text contact really every snow day, and we said as soon as the weather got nice, we were gonna make sure we sat down and had coffee. So it's on my to-do list to make sure that we connect soon. I know that we partner with them, I think we send more students than some of the other districts do.
Any of the other?
Yeah, and we share information with them at the start of every year. I'll talk to her about kind of what we share, what some of the work that she's doing is. I know that they've had some turnover at the superintendent level there, but the new superintendent seems like she's hoping to stay for an extended period of time. And I know that we have a lot of students who have really benefited from programming at Minuteman. We've also had a number of students who've come back after a couple of years at Minuteman over the last few years. I don't have a lot of insight into what's driving those decisions because we don't pry about enrollment decisions. But we also have programming at Arlington High that's meeting some of the needs that students who were curious about Minuteman had. So some of the new programming at the high school is teaching business skills. It's teaching, we have the makerspace in the new high school, and so it's a draw for that reason too. And I think that might be driving some of the decisions students are making, is we have some programming that fulfills some of those needs. But no, I haven't met her yet, but it's part of my spring docket.
Thank you. Go to lunch.
Alan Jones.
Thank you. I'm gonna try to ask this in a way you can answer it without compromising any future negotiations or anything. But how do you think we're doing in terms of teacher retention and recruitment and such?
That's a great question. The recruitment has improved significantly over the FY 25 hiring season. It was easier to attract candidates. It was easier to provide an offer to really exciting candidates and have them accept it. So that's been nice. It's actually resulted in less administrative time spent redoing a search, which has been felt by our administrative team. And we're more filled this year than we have been any other year in terms of actually filling the positions that we have in the roster. The retention, I believe, has improved, but I'm actually right in the middle of analyzing that. So if you ask me that in an email in like a week and a half, I'll have some better answers for you. But we do see improving retention in special education, which is fantastic, because that was a really tough area to hold on to people in for a little while. We are seeing some improved retention of paraprofessionals actually, and that is, I credit that to both our flexible schedule in the new contract where we added 100 minutes, but we kind of get to decide where that goes, and that's sometimes helpful in people's lives. And we've got some partnerships with some of our after school programs that allow them to pair with us and after school with them and fill out a schedule that I think has been attractive too. So it's getting better on retention, and recruitment has been
Yeah, so that's encouraging because you know, a bad answer means you're probably heading for a financial cliff of some sort. So that's excellent, thank you.
Carolyn?
So just, John, back to your question, I did email back and forth with Alex today. And he said, one of the things you have to remember is, and Chuck used the long range plan to ask me a question about insurance, is in health insurance and liability insurance do not sit in either the town or the school operating budget. It sits within long range plan. Now you can say, and it does that because it fluctuates so much. And you can say, but long range plan is quote unquote the town budget. And you might have some accuracy in that. However, town insurance doesn't sit within town operating budget either. Alex did say that they had estimated both the number of students and in the case of the number of hires. So the numbers were low this year, so we're gonna be under this year. He will add in those students. I think and as I had mentioned last time, he is agreeing that he wants to look at the percent estimates going forward for insurance. So he'll be doing that between now and next year. What else did he say? Those were the main things he came back with. I might, if you have a specific question, I might know some more.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Ellen?
Sorry, but when did you have the discussion? Because I'm worried, does that affect the growth factor, which is gonna like change all the numbers?
No, it won't change it for this budget, it's for next year.
Thank you.
He's not changing anything for this year. He just knows he probably needs to going forward.
Any last questions? Dean, do you have a motion?
Oh, I gotta find the town appropriation, hold on. Do you have the town appropriation number?
I got it. Ready?
No, you're gonna fill in the blank, ready? All right, I move that the finance committee approve the recommended appropriation of the school committee of
$103,630,672.
Is there a second? All right, any further discussion or questions? John?
Yeah, I'm not gonna vote for this budget, because I think a vote for this budget clearly is a vote for an override, saying that we need an override. I don't think there's any way we can pass this budget and not have an override. And I think that as we consider whether, if anyone votes for this budget and then votes against the override, I would ask them to explain the math to me, because I don't think the math works in any way. And I think the affordability of the town is a concern. I know we have appropriated several $1 million to affordable housing through our CPA funds. And I think that's a great goal to maintain the economic diversity of this town. I think the economic diversity of Arlington is one of the many things that makes Arlington such a great town. But if we continue to raise the taxes and, you know, maybe throw some money toward the affordable housing, we're gonna haul up the middle because the people in the middle just won't be able to handle these increased taxes every 3 years. So with that said, I'm gonna vote against it.
Anybody have anything else? All right, there's been a motion, it's been seconded. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In the affirmative. Noes, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Any abstentions? The motion passed. Thank you very much for your presentation and bringing forward, and thank you for coming. All right.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
And 1240. All right, disabilities.
There were other ways to
Madam Chair. I just have 1 second. Back to the school budget before we move on.
Yep. So we have.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Go ahead, Dean.
So, just a quick aside on the school budget for, you know, it's a huge budget, right? And I just wanna sort of recognize, at least internally, some of the great work that Josh did on this and Peggy did on this, because one of the things that happens in school budgets is they're monstrous things to create, and you get a new school CFO, and they're like lost in the budget most of the year. And so Josh definitely should believe Peggy helped a lot of just like going, it's like, that's why they made a comment early on about Josh was through all of it, because it was like, he was on like call after call after call, that like as they worked through these iterations and things like that, and that's why it came out late and things like that. So it did take a monstrous amount of like daytime budget subcommittee meetings with him lurking and commenting and helping. So I didn't want that to go unrecognized for both the members of the
Thank you all.
subcommittee. Yeah, for both members of the
Appreciate
subcommittee.
that. Thank you both.
Thank you for all your work.
I didn't do anything this year.
All right.
You're not clapping.
We have with us the Disabilities Commission representatives, and I'd like you to introduce yourself and then talk about what money you would like.
Sure. Tim Ross, ADA coordinator, Grace Carpenter.
On the Disability Commission.
Yeah, so I think everyone's has seen the FY25 fourth quarter expenses as well as FY26. So I can go through this real quickly, and then if folks have any questions, happy to answer in more detail. So we have broken down into categories: printing and materials, general printing for flyers and brochures, banner design for Disability Pride Month in July, and the printing of those banners. These are the banners that hang on Mass Ave. Town Day giveaways or swag, as I like to refer to it. Accepting away folks who come over to the booth. Disability education books, again, similar to the Town Day giveaway. These are just books that we can have for educational purposes, and also give those away if folks are interested in. Soundproofing for some of the rooms in the community center, the yoga room, arts and crafts, and the game room. FM assistive hearing, our hearing assistant system for town hall. That is just audio accessibility for town hall, meetings, obviously town meeting. We have a ramp for the bike shed, a locking system for the bike shed, some assistive ice skating equipment at the Ed Burns Arena. We have a platform wheelchair lift that needs to be replaced at the Robbins Library Community Room. Some friction anti-slip tape for the community center stairs. Next month, we're holding an autism awareness event at the Regent, screening the documentary, and we have food for that event as well. And then a donation to Top Soccer, a program in Arlington that we've worked with in the past. All that totals up to $26,836 for the rest of this year.
And what are you looking for next year?
Next year, we are looking for 20,000, keeping it the same. Again, printing materials, general printing of flyers, brochures, and posters. Again, going off of the theme of visibility for the commission and disabled residents in general. October is Disability Employment Awareness Month. We have some ADA improvements. Money set aside, again, similar to what is listed in FY25. These are things that kind of pop up throughout the year that the commission will tackle. We have some trainings that will be held for the general community, as well as town staff, boards, commissioners, community partners. So those will be put on through Health Without Limits. That's an initiative out of UMass Medical. They provide those trainings. They can be both in person and virtual. And then we have programming and events. Again, the event that we're holding in April is going to be about, or is going to be 2,500. And we're planning on doing next year fall and spring awareness events. Figuring those will cost about the same. And then at the bottom we have the Town Day food raffle fee for $75.
Do you have a reserve? Reserve?
Yes, in the past couple of 2 years now, or last year, that we have money left over to spend, which is why this fourth quarter for FY25 is the 26,000.
How much is in the reserve now?
I believe there is over at least 10,000. I believe we have there with this 26,000. I think there was about 3,500 left over.
So you have 3,000 left.
Yes.
And do you know how much you collect in the town collects in fines?
I don't know the exact number. I do know that it's changed quite a bit over the years. Obviously, COVID kind of threw some things, those numbers out of whack. But I don't know what the past year has looked like.
You know, the average over the last couple of years, maybe.
5,000, 6,000 maybe.
Questions? Sophie?
Can you remind us of the mission of the disability committee?
Sure. The mission is to advocate and advise on disability and accessibility throughout the town. That's, throughout the town departments, assisting residents with any things that pop up around town.
Is that it, Sophie?
I'll follow up if there's
Grant and then Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very good. Alex, some of the events that you have scheduled, they're real events and not just, I think that's great. Can you tell me, when is that region screening?
Tentatively for April 27th at noon.
How is that being, how have people being made aware of that?
We'll be putting out social media for all the commissions in the DEI division, so disability, human rights, Rainbow, with the libraries, CPAC to the school, and then I imagine I will be doing some flyering around town as well.
Okay, no other public, no other. Your Arlington, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, the other is, I also like the, this disability dialogue that's scheduled for this coming year, upcoming year.
Yes.
What venue is that going to be?
Probably the community center, that first level, big room.
Will be moderated or presented or what kind of?
Some will be presented and then Q&A at the end.
Any role playing perhaps?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. This sounds like good.
Thank you.
Different programs, thank you.
Michael.
You're committing or you're spending your entire year's budget plus a third more out of reserves in 1 quarter of the fiscal year?
Yes.
Seems strange.
Yeah, I have been out on FMLA leave for the past 2.5 months. I've also lost over half of our commissioners in the past year. So there's been a lot of turnover and absences.
Who appoints your commissioners?
Select board.
Excuse me?
The select board. Except that they also come from a couple other places. The select
Have they
board-
been responsive to your needs of filling out the board?
Yeah, we just had a new commissioner join. It's a matter of, attracting folks that are interested. But they did respond.
How many commissioners do you have right now?
5.
5, and I think there's one perhaps. And what's the full complement?
9.
Other questions? Sophie?
So, can you tell us a bit about how you liaison with the town in your advocacy role? Because we learned how, in capital planning, I think it was, that there was $350,000 not spent in their accounts for accessibility and things. Was there any talk with them about how they weren't spending it before?
So what I've learned is that I was under the assumption, I think, Bruce can echo that, is that the town manager's office was responsible for planning that money out through the capital budget each year, and working with facilities. Obviously the commission has input into what they prioritize, and we've identified that in the transition plan, which is basically any building that was identified working from the outside in for prioritization. It's great if you have accessible bathrooms and facilities in the middle of town hall, but if there's no parking or entryways, doesn't really do anyone any good. So we had sent those prioritizations over to town hall, the town manager's office, and I was assuming that they would kind of take that and run with it. I know that there's been a lot of turnover in facilities as well, and they have been down some staff, which has impacted that. But I think we're hoping to kind of restart that process. Now that I'm back full time, I can start planning to do that.
And a specific question about the bike shed. So this is the bike shed over at the Ed Burns Arena area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was built to hold bicycles that are for accessibility usage.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised to hear at I think one of your meetings how you now need a ramp because actually it was built where it's not accessible for people with disabilities. So it's the shed built for people with disabilities to use.
Mm-hmm.
But access to the shed was not considered to be accessible?
Yeah, I was under the assumption that it would be flush with the pavement, and it wasn't built that way.
And this should come out of your budget instead of a town budget because why?
We have the money for it, and it's something that the commission can do now with.
And I guess same question goes back since we had this discussion last year about the access to the doors to the library when the buttons were pushed and weren't working anymore. The chairlift now, I think you're saying that's broken or not working. And again, you're being asked to pay for that, or you're choosing to pay for that instead of going through facilities for repair.
Yeah.
Because it's extremely loud, that's actually one of the, it's really disruptive for anyone who wants to be in an event.
Oh, I'm sure it needs to be repaired, I don't question that it needs to be repaired.
What you might not hear, but I can hear sitting next to it, is the eyebrow raising. You're paying for this?
Yeah, right. And also, let's see, I think there were, are there any other sports besides top soccer that can also be added or that offer availability for those with disabilities or not? Is it just?
None that I know of or have been approached by. But obviously I think that recreation partnership is really great. In the past, we've purchased the floating beach wheelchairs for the res. Obviously they're working on the bikes at Ed Burns, and I think just it's another sport and venue for us to partner with.
And we learned, I think at our last meeting, the Civilian Police Advisory Board, I think your commission is entitled to appoint a commissioner to that board, or is that something you're doing, or did you know that you have ability to appoint to that board?
Yeah, our previous chair was the appointee on that commission, stepped down this past fall for medical reasons, so working on that.
Can I ask you, so I'm still sort of trying to understand some of the, so why, you said that you were surprised that the commission is giving money to the library.
Right, what we had discussed last year, I think with Tim at this meeting, was that there's certain fixing certain facilities problems should be going through the facilities department and the facilities budget, so to get a handle on the budget. So it's not a matter of whether it needs to be done or not, just a question of who's talking about it.
And the same with capital.
Same with capital, right, because there's 350,000, when they've been putting 100,000 a year, and now because they didn't spend they built up 350,000, they actually didn't even ask for the 100 this year for disability, because they have unspent 350, whereas they could have been spending that 350 and asked for 100 this year. But that hasn't happened. And the question is why.
Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the question here is, is the charter of the Disability Commission to make people aware and advocate on behalf of people with disabilities? Or is it their responsibility to go around fixing things in the town with basically a limited budget to sort of do these on an ad hoc basis? And I think the town should be, when I say the town, I'm referring to the town manager, the board of selectmen, and various organizations, should be more focused on fixing these things or providing for these facilities within the normal scope of the town budget. That's at least, I think, where the discussion is leading.
Dean?
Yeah, so I think it's gonna be an easy question, actually, but I think it's informative for the committee because it's something I have learned in the last year about how the Disability Commission works. So in your role in particular, Tim, so when projects so the commissioners, like everyone said, identify projects, but then it comes to you for execution. One of the things you probably don't remember is that top soccer donation goes to the Arlington Soccer Club, and me and Travis spent all this time emailing back and forth on it last year in the spring, right? So they identify, so the question always becomes in people's minds, but let me back up, when a commission goes low in members, is anybody like minding the store with funds, right? But my experience with you was, even though the commissioners recommended and approve it, you're the execution end of it. Like, you kept asking me all sorts of questions to be like, what the heck is this money going for, and what are you gonna do with it, and how are we gonna buy it? And I think you actually did the purchasing, you donated to us at that point, right? So even when it's fair to say, even when the commission goes down in members, there's still somebody minding the financial store, because it all comes through you. Because even last year in the spring, when you bought the equipment for us, like, you went out and did it, and we scoped out and all that. It wasn't just like, the commissioners are writing blank checks. I think that's a fair way to explain it. Yeah, okay.
Grant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can agree with the principal about that, and whatever liability might be involved or the code, but at the same time, I can really appreciate that they can get it done. And also, I think, did the wheelchair, is that like $8,000? Is that all that is? Is that can you get somebody?
Yeah, they range in, they're a couple $1,000s.
You can't even get somebody to come look for something for $1,000 or $2,000. So that's an amazing estimate. I don't know that one would be the same estimate as far as facilities. So I don't know. It's a tough thing, but I think it gets on the list and it gets on the docket and gets done. And I didn't know about the principal part of it, but I'm glad they got a great price on it. Hope it gets done. Thank you.
All right, anything further? Is there a motion?
I move that we, that is a budget of 26,836.
No,
That's back
20,000.
For this FY6 budget for the disability commission.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions?
I'm sort of struggling with this whole idea of this group doing things that really should be the facilities. And I guess I'm curious, are you a paid employee?
Yes.
Okay, so you are paid by the town to do this. So, and how does it work with the facilities? Do you go to them first before you try to fix something on your own? How does that work?
So previously all the issues identified in the transition plan, I took those, put that in a spreadsheet, prioritized them through the input of the commission, sent that over to the town manager's office, and was under the assumption that they were working with facilities to earmark all that out with $100,000 each year. I didn't know that wasn't being done, and again, there's been a lot of turnover with facilities that would just prevent that from being done in general without, not having any employees over there. But what I have been doing is, researching the options, like with the chairlift. Been in contact with a company in Marlboro for the soundproofing in the community center rooms. Took a tape measure, was out there measuring, figuring out what square footage of sound absorption panels would be needed. So yeah, I've taken on a more proactive role in kind of figuring out the basic information, and now we can go to facilities and they can implement that.
So it will be the facilities that will actually implement these fixes. So you're not out there hiring a wheelchair lift operator or whatever.
No, and I'm confident I could handle the soundproofing panels. I'm less confident in installing a wheelchair lift myself, but I'm happy to help out in any way.
Okay, so we have a motion that's been seconded. I think we raised some issues that are worth exploring. Sophie's been our liaison, and I think we these are things that we can continue to pursue for next year's budget. But right now, we have a budget for, a motion for 20,000, it's been seconded. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15, 16. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right,
Congratulations.
Grant, you're on, and we have a lot of work to do, so if you can get your presentation.
You don't wanna wait until like 10 of or something? No, okay.
We're gonna be going past 10. I'm just warning people, I'm gonna suspend the Mary Roman rule because we have some warrant articles we need to do, we have some revotes to take.
Yep.
So we're just like halfway through it.
Okay. As long as there aren't any pesky questions, we can go right through. Alright, so first we can do the warrant articles, and then we can do the budget review, and then offset review. Warrant article 53, that's for the sewer main replacement, and we're it always gets tricky in how you ask it, but the warrant articles for 800,000. How the mechanics work is that 100,000 comes out of the water sewer budget that goes toward the same process. So the total amount that they spend is going to be 900,000, but the amount of the sewer article is 800,000. We'll see a line item for $100,000 sewer budget for this as well. One of the questions that I think was asked last year, the engineering questions, which are more interesting than the offset questions. What kind of pipe material are we using for the sewer? And the answer is they use PVC piping for the sewer. It's less corrosive and lasts a lot longer. Another question asked, I believe, or maybe I made it up, was are we taking advantage of new technologies for the sewer replacement pipe? And apparently we do. We use what they call a trenchless method, where they basically, for lack of a better word, shove the new pipe into the old pipe without having to dig up the ground. So they basically use a liner to do that. So that's the new technology they use for the replacing the sewer pipe with PVC. So I would move that the Finance Committee approve or support the amount of $800,000 for the Article 53 sewer line replacement.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous? Go ahead, Grant.
Oh, like in kind, Article 54 is the water. And this is the same sort of thing. The ask or the article is actually for 1.4 million. We'll see a line in the water budget for 100,000. That's their contribution. Another way of looking at it is that we're asking, in addition to the 100,000 in the budget, we're asking 1.4 million to be approved in the warrant article. Same type of thing. What kind of pipe is used for the water? They use a cement-lined ductile iron pipe for the water. Now, if you look that up in Wikipedia, which everyone's welcome to do, this type of pipe prevents tuberculation. What? Yeah, tuberculation. That's basically arteriosclerosis of the pipes. That's when material buildup is in the pipe and impedes water flow. So the cement liner stops the corrosive effects that the water has against the piping. And that is the engineering part of it. Again, we asked the questions about is there any new technology used? And apparently there's no trenchless method for the water lines. They have to dig up the ground. There's no help for that. They have to dig up the ground to do that. So
You cannot push cement line ductile iron through.
especially thinner water pipes that already have built up. So I move that the Finance Committee approve, support the amount of 1.4 million for Article 54, water mains replacement.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Unanimous.
All right, well, that was good. So the next is the budget, and let's do this in well, maybe 3 sections, the magic rule of 3. Anyone have the opportunity or take the opportunity of, looking at the budget when it first came out? I know anyone other than now may have noticed that there's a new format to it. And it's great because it makes it a little bit easier to explain. Hopefully it makes it easier to understand. Something about this makes this water and sewer budget a little bit unique. Again, the rule of 3, love everything in 3s. This year there were 3 revisions to the budget from the one in the budget book until now. So people say, why do we always wait for the last minute? Because I like to do that at the very last minute. No, it's not. It's because we got to wait until the adjustments come in. Late February, the MWRA does their adjustments and releases their final numbers. So we adjust the budget then. And then mid-March, late last week essentially, that's when the insurance numbers come out and we adjust the budget again. Then the third time is that, well, if there's any little burps or hiccups or corrections that show up because of all the massaging that had to be done from the original one, then yeah, there often are, and that's what happened this time. So the budget we're reviewing is pretty much hot off the press, just released today. So that's subtlety, but that's why we're using that budget. Something nice about how this budget is organized this time around, the new chart of accounts, which comes into play in terms of trying to reconcile it. But there's now just 3 main categories. There's sewer collection, storm sewer, and water distribution. There used to be some water sewer properties and all these other things that didn't make any sense. So now there's just those 3. And it makes it a little bit easier to review. Following along the rule of 3, the water sewer budget is a little bit different than the other budgets. You have your operating expenses, you have your indirect expenses, and then we have debt service. It's a little bit different than most of the other budgets. So, with those 3, we've got your operating expenses, your indirects, and your debt service. Where, of course, would you think we'd start? Indirects, sure. Let's start with the indirects. That's where the budget starts. This one's again, it's great that it was well organized, but now it's where it gets a little bit less than organized. We start with sewer because it's alphabetically comes before water. And we start with indirects because, well, that's where the budget starts because the salary portion is all into water. Something other interesting way that we do or divide up the water and sewer budget. I'm talking about maybe we should just call it all one big budget and not have to do things 50-50. Except that there's a number of different ways to allocate it. Some of the overhead we allocated 50-50, 50% water, 50% sewer. That's just really the pretty easiest way of doing it. There are other expenses that not so done 50-50, things like training and development. You're taking a water operator's course. It's not really sewer related. So some of those things are allocated based on usage. So there's all different ways to be allocated. On the indirects, this is the top portion where we have all of these amounts we've already covered in a different budget in terms of the actual offsets. And so all of these increases that we see have nothing to do with the operating portion of the water budget. It's everything to do with the indirect costs involved with health insurance, retirements, or labor costs from other departments. And like they did in those budgets, they went up and they go up here too. So that's pretty much the indirects. The next move is the operating expenses for sewer collection. Now, again, so we have electricity attributed to sewer collection. Not sure how we allocate it, but that's the amount that's been used. The biggest portion of the sewer collection expense is the MWRA assessment. And if you recall, the whole water and sewer thing is basically set up like a retail business or like a wholesaler, where we buy the product from the MWRA, and we dispose of the product via the MWRA, and then we also add on to whatever cost that is to our end users. We have no control over the assessment, and again, they change it in the middle of the year, or rather at the end of February. And it went up. And it's sort of kind of reminds me a little bit, somewhat of the Minuteman, is that we have all these different towns that belong to the MWRA. And the cost is all divided up based on their usage, but it all has to equal one big number. The rest of the lines in this budget, there's contracted services. And now if you look at contracted services, you notice that they went down, and you think that, wow, all these vacancies, why would it go down? The reason why it went down by, in this case, $3,800 is they separated a line item called telephone expenses. And if you look down a few lines, you'll notice that that's a brand new item, and it's $3,800. So they just separated that so it's a little bit easier to identify the costs. Now, by the way, because that was a new account, it didn't exist before, there was a little hiccup when they did the Excel spreadsheets, and that was kind of an amount that didn't get included into the totals, but it's fixed now. Again, sort of when you insert a line in Excel, it draws the calculations as opposed to when you paste it. The next item we have is materials, and if we look, that has a slight increase in it, and part of the point of that is to try and even it out to what's actually spent. They often use a rolling 2-year average for that sort of thing. The items of unemployment compensation and workman's comp costs, those have been moved, which is nice because they really are operating expenses. They used to be included in the indirect expenses. So it makes more sense that they're now actually in the operating expenses. The next line down is the rehab capital line, and that's for $100,000. And this is for the root of the expenditure for the sewer line replacement, of which we add the $800,000 for the warrant article. So we have our indirects, we have our operating expenses, and now we move along to the debt section. We have two types of debts. We have to pay down the principal, of course, but we also have interest debts, nasty interest, and then we have those lovely MWRA interest-free loans. And so those are the two line items there, in addition to the principal. And that's the exciting part of the sewer collection system. The next section is at the very bottom of the page, and this is the stormwater. And this is pretty static, there's been no change. Rehab capital has actually decreased. And one of the reasons why I guess it increased is that there just have a need for less projects is what's going on. If you look at actuals, that kind of looks like that's how it's played out as well. A little note for you reconciling folks, analyst type people, is that this item, rehab capital, right now is miscategorized when it comes to the summary portion. Still adds up okay, but it's actually incorporated in the expense section and not in the debt and capital. It's itemized out in one of the attachments, but that's the little anomaly. All right, so if we want to move to the next page, we have In this case, we start off the water distribution budget, we actually start off with operating expenses because these are where the salaries are. Now, some of these people also work in sewer, but we have them easily categorized, again, how we split it up. We do a 50-50, sometimes we do it, sometimes we just lump it all into one department. And this matches the salary detail. And as again, reasonable increases. I asked about the overtime increase, that's tied to the actual salary increase. That's tied to salaries, which also increases. I did ask about clothing allowance and cleaning allowance because I think it was either asked last year, and so it's on the line, the questions, but it's so you can buy your own clothing and so you can clean your own clothing. You know, I had a client who worked for who delivered oil, and the front hallway, when he walked in, it's where he was hung up his clothes, it smelled like an oil tank, because that's, so I can imagine if you work with, you know, water and sewer all day, that you would appreciate being able to clean your clothes. The next item, we have the indirects. Now, these are those 4 items that exactly are half of what we saw under the sewer indirects. And we can explain these further on the offset scorecard. But basically, this is the health insurance offset divided by 2. Retirement offset divided by 2. Well, the revised retirement offset divided by 2. Also, during our little excursion of investigating all the reconciling and totaling up, we also noticed that the retirement budget offset didn't match. So that's one reason why we are revoting that. So now we're on to the operating expenses for water. And, you know, one would think, wow, that electricity really jumped up quite a bit. And it's interesting, apparently the new building is mostly heated and cooled by electricity. And this electricity is not only shared between water and sewer, but also with the DPW department. So natural gas decreases because of that, because we're using less of that. Then we have the MWRA assessment for the water, and you know, that increases, but gotta appreciate that water. Contracted services decreased by 3,000. Again, it's not because we actually used less contracted services, but if we look down a few lines to newly added telephone expenses, we see that it's $3,000, so they separated that amount out.
And who is RM?
We want to hold the questions until the end.
Yeah, let's Grant finish and without being interrupted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Proper decorum. So, and then the next lines, we talked last year, the Great Meadows expense became rather, had a little bit of notoriety. And then all the other lines are pretty flat. We've had some additionals to the capital, which is also included in the operating, where we bought a jet truck and a 1-ton dump truck. The final item rehab capital is the $100,000 that we kick in, or rather that we root for the water line replacement, and that we add 1.4 million from the article to basically accommodate, hopefully, about a mile of pipe. Third, last portion of this is the water debt portion, and again, this is the same reciprocal part of the sewer portion, where the we have to pay off the principal, and then we have any interest-bearing debt, and then we have the interest-free MWRA debt. So the next section is the summary review section. And also the revenue section. So this might be a good time to kind of answer some of the other questions that we had before we go into the attachments. And then vote, then ask for the vote. One of the questions was, someone asked, number 801, asked if we can do a multi-year analysis that shows volume of water used divided by the volume of water we purchase from the MWRA. And Mike's response to that was, we report that as unaccounted water. Let's just take the inverse of that, do the unaccounted water. And that gets asked later on here as well. There's some other questions about when can we take some serious action against these people who aren't complying with the meter conversion requirements. I have a revenue-based question on that later on. One of the things I might want to think about is that this is 800 users or so, and while they are working on it, it's only about maybe 6% of the total users. And you know, I recall in a different lifetime, lots of Fortune 500 companies have legacy type systems, little dangling things. It could be the fleet maintenance software, it could be anything else that are still running on either, you know, let's say antiquated systems. So it's not all that unusual to have that happen, in my opinion. It is the type of project I think I'd like to do. It's a closed set. You could find out who these people are and what they do and why it's taking that way. But what I have asked is if they can provide an estimated dollar impact for these 800 meters or so that have not been converted. 6.3% of the building users. So it turns out, I wasn't aware of this, but what they do is they take a 3-year average for these accounts and bill them for that. So they're still getting billed, we're still getting revenue from it. It costs a little bit more to send out these average bills. And we're probably getting, you know, they're probably getting maybe a 10% discount because their meters don't turn as fast as the new technology used to. So I think when I asked Alex about this, they were, you know, talking about it. You know, they're working with the legal department and, you know, see what they can do. But he was also working on trying to get some grant money or some money, millions of dollars for some Hardy School replacement. So I kind of think that priority kind of made it a little bit better. One other question was about, if you look at the questions, there's a link here. There's a question about the progress of the CSO overflow dynamic that's occurring between our neighboring towns. And Mike's response was they're actively being evaluated and solutions developed within these communities. If you stay in tune with what that's actually going on, I'm not so sure about the solutions, but they are actively being evaluated. And there's a webinar for public comment that he provided in the link. It goes in the attachment. Some final questions was what was the unaccounted water? Not the accounted. The unaccounted water was 16% plus or minus. So ergo, the accounted water must be 84%. I'd asked about how many total billable accounts there were for this year, and he said he'd get back to me, but I haven't gotten back. So what I did is on the attachment, I just used last year's amounts to calculate. So if we want to move on to the attachments, please. The first one is, I believe this is the offset package. The first page of this is basically a list of how they come up with the blended rate. The first one is regarding the health insurance, how they come up with the blended rate for health insurance, retirement, offsets. What they do is they take every operating budget and divide it by the water and sewer operating budget, and they come up with these percentages. And we add up the percentages at the bottom of the page, it rounds up to 12.68%. That's the average. So what then they do is if you look on the other handouts, which aren't in order, this is the health insurance calculation, it's page 3, and the retirement. if you notice that the admin or the non-DPW departments have this 12.68%. Although in retirement, it's 0.1268, it's just how it's expressed. So that's how they come up with that amount and use in the offset. If we go to page 2, we see how the water and sewer offsets are calculated. These are all the percentages that were provided by the Powers and Sullivan study that was done sometime in this era. And so if you look, what they do is they take the total amount of 823,148 and they divide it by 2, and that amount shows up in the other admin costs. And then the bottom portion of these are the DPW related departments that also do work for water and sewer. So by the way, the total offsets, expenses or indirects, about 17 or 18% of the entire budget. So if you want these people to do more work and charge more, we can stick them on the 800 accounts, but it's all, and money's gonna come from somewhere, so we have to do that type of work. The final 2 pages of the handouts, this is a little scorecard that I write up that I call it the consolidated FY26 sewer and water budgets amounts. And I use this to kind of reconcile everything that else is on the budget. So I kind of put that in there and kind of pleased that someone else actually even looks at it. But every single amount or offset amount I can tie to from on this page. So if you look, the first sections are the sewer indirects and the water indirects, and then the combined amounts. So all those health insurance, and you see the page references there, the health insurance, what page you came from, that's the amount. The new retirement amount will be there. And then on the bottom portion, this is the water and sewer offsets. These are for the DPW labor costs and the now called town admin costs. Then on the final one, this is a little extra bonus that I put together, but it did catch some of the other stuff. This is the, I call it the water sewer budget breakdown, summary breakdown. And this directly matches, there is a breakdown of what we see on the final page of the budget under the personnel or under the services summaries. And each line item there corresponds to which items. It's basically added, the budget gets added up in a different way. I would point this out is that, as I mentioned before, in the expenses summary happens to include a capital amount that was in storm sewer. It really should be in the capital debt section, but when you add them all up, it comes up to the same amount that matches the master budget as well. So, with that, I would move. I did this on a larger sheet so I could read the numbers, but I think I can do it here. So I would move that the Finance Committee approve or support total of $25,360,987 for expenses, and also approve and support $25,360,987 in revenues.
Second.
Any questions? Charlie?
This is what takes so much time.
Charlie?
So, in reading your question and answer sheet, somebody asked a question about whether or not we were still under any MWRA investigation for water leaks. And I remember reading less than a year ago that we still were. And you said they weren't, the answer was that we were not. Has that suddenly been solved?
Well, to the person who did ask that question, I asked Alex the same question, and Alex wasn't aware of any, and Mike succinctly writes back, no. I don't know where to go on that. Other than we write to them again. I don't know where you got it, what the references to where we saw it from.
Any other questions? All right, we have a motion, it's been seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Now we have to re-vote the pension budget. There was an error with the offset in the pension budget, so you should have received an updated budget page today. Dean,
Move as presented,
are you moving
whatever you're holding.
15 million, a total taxation amount of 15,866,268.
That's exactly what I'm moving.
Any questions on why we need to do this? It's Alex found and the offset was not accurately calculated.
After a little prodding, yes.
So there's a motion, it's been seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. We also have to go and re-vote, one of the first votes we took this year was, which was the Historic Districts Commission budget, because I discovered when I was going through the minutes that it appears we voted on it twice with different amounts. So I want to clarify.
Just pick the lowest one.
Well, unfortunately, they were looking for the higher number.
I moved the correct amount, which is,
Which is 6,000, right? Or it's 8,000, 8,000, right?
exactly what I moved, 8,000.
Second.
All right. Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous. All right. Let's see, now we have
I can feel it.
Article 70. The overlay reserve. I have an amount from the assessors, it is $750,000.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
What article is it on top?
70.
What's it about? If you fight your assessment.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimous. Use of free cash. The number in the long range plan is $10,298,997.
Who just stated?
Second,
Can you speak a little louder? What did you say?
It's $10,298,997.
And it's for what?
This is for free cash.
Oh, free cash.
so that's half of the certified amount.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, comments, discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Next is skip 70, like we'll do a town meeting, we'll skip 73 for 74. Collective bargaining, there are no contracts, but we need to put money in the salary reserve. And the number I have gotten from the deputy town manager is $431,095.
So moved.
Second.
431095
431095,
into the reserve.
yes. Any questions, comments on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, and then we need that last number. Alan, do you have a number for that? For Article 73? Do you have anything, Alan?
Well, I'm within $84,000 of manager's number. So, you know, there's been too many moving parts, there's not a result. So I'm gonna say 9,169,536, but it's likely to change.
What's the number again?
9,169,536.
And it's the manager's budget, higher or lower than that?
And actually lower than that, but.
I move that the finance committee approve 9,169,536 into the fiscal stability stabilization fund.
No,
Such
from-
number
from-
out of the, that's right, out of the fiscal stability stabilization fund, such number to be modified with the, by the chair with the approval of the vice chair for numbers.
Did you just steal your line?
It was great. I loved it.
All right, that's the motion, has it been seconded?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's unanimous. All right, last couple of things. Alan will be sending head counts, right, Alan? To everybody.
Well, I'll be sending out the draft budgets, and I want everybody to look at the numbers in their budgets.
And the head counts. And when do you think you can get that out, Alan?
End of the week. Next few days, probably.
So, next week, we're gonna have to get this report to the printer, so, look at look at what Alan sends you as soon as you get it, and then be done with it. Anyone who has any, comments to the investment policy, keep sending them my way, I got a few so far. And lastly,
Article 21.
is that the school?
That's the
Oh, we
second
didn't ask the school.
legislation.
Ask that.
I think I made comments in it and then forwarded back, but I can't remember if I sent it to you or directly, or just left the comments in the.
The investment
Yeah.
policy, you sent it to me, I have it.
Oh,
I have it, I have Charlie's, I have Topher's. Yes, we didn't ask about the
School bus.
the school bus. Would you
I asked him,
mind-
but I didn't get an answer. I'll pursue with him with this.
If you just send us along what they say about that.
Send the answer after the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not looking for an appropriation.
Okay, so we don't have to vote anything.
We're just curious.
Yeah, alright. Last thing, I sent everyone the final cybersecurity report that, our very, very hardworking working group worked on for many, many months, and I'm really impressed with what they have done, and really the amount of work they put in is really almost stupefying. I would like a vote to receive the report, which will be appended to our FinCom report so that town meeting can have the benefit of the index research.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, comments on that?
Great job.
Yeah. It was a great report, and I'm really impressed with the bad actors. I mean, that was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
How they were able to infiltrate into there.
Remember that when you get one of those text messages.
Yeah, be very,
Yeah.
very careful with your email.
Yes. Well, I can't even send one to them anymore. I can't use the town meeting. I tried to notify the selectmen. I sent my own email, it rejected it. I sent it through the town and said, no, you can't do that. So I picked up the telephone.
So we're, all right, so there's been a motion to receive the report. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. John?
Oh, yeah.
Unanimous. All right, thank you again, Alan, Annie, Daryl,
It was
and.
fun. That was a great report.
It was.
It read like you took enjoyment in it.
No, I gotta tell you, it's 60% Ally, so I went to a couple of meetings, but he did all the writing.
All right, so we are just about finished. Alan, Mackay and I are gonna be working on a report. I'm not envisioning needing another meeting. But we will let you know. I will let you know if something comes up that requires a meeting. Otherwise, plan to be ready for the first night. Meeting. Minutes. We'll do minutes. Dean. We'll do minutes.
Okay. I was just gonna let you administrative changes, but okay.
Let's do minutes. Do you have any you want to put up real quick? Third time. All right, has everyone looked at the minutes of March 10th? Rebecca?
Section 2A, the first reference to AHS student achievements, I believe that should be Minuteman student achievements.
Anything else on the minutes of March 10th? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any further questions, discussion, revisions? All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Any affirmative, any negatives, any abstentions? Two abstentions.
This is for the March 10th.
Yep. All right, next one. March 12th. Anyone have any corrections to the March 12th meeting minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand. 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in the affirmative. Negative votes, abstentions. 1.
So
2.
why is it Monday, March 12th? Because it should be Wednesday, March 12th.
You mean on the minutes?
Yeah. On the minutes.
I mean, the folder says Wednesday. Yeah.
It says
Wednesday.
Wednesday in the minutes.
All right, so we have that. This is my second day. All right, we have that correction to the March 12th minutes. All right, again, all in favor of the March 12th minutes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Any negative votes? Abstentions? 2 abstentions. Wait, no, 1 abstention. All right, and then we have 317. Any revisions to the minutes of 317? Is there a motion to approve the minutes of 317?
Moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. And then the minutes of March 19th. Any revisions? All right, all those in favor? Is there a motion?
So
Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Opposed, abstentions, 1. And that's it. Dean, what did you have?
So I move that the finance committee authorizes its chair and vice chair in putting together the report to town meeting to administratively correct all reconciliation errors between budget without needing approval from the finance committee.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes. We are done.
Wow.
Almost, but you all are done.
And we are good.
You are good.